is not allowed in an innovation summit. Okay? So stretch. Talk to your neighbor. Talk to them. Tell them you're enjoying your sessions. If you can do a high five, do a high five. Are you enjoying your sessions? Excellent, excellent. So I have a proposal. Okay. We're supposed to do a life break, which we just done, right? We've done it, right? Yes. So I'm thinking we just run through the two panels and then we can go for break. Because if we take a break, we're going to lose another 30 minutes and then we'll close too late. Are we listening? Excellent. Anyway, innovators are cool people. Yeah? Innovators are cool people. So in this session we have a panel, a keynote address talking about commercialization. Commercialization is a big thing, guys. As people who are talking about innovation, we need to be able to see how that innovation is going to turn out and generate revenues and build our economies. So it's a big deal. So we'll be talking. We have Dr. McLean Sibanda, who is also the author of Nuts and Bolts, and a big innovation person based out of South Africa. He was at one time the CEO of the Innovation Hub. Really cool guy. So we'll do a keynote, but this will be a recorded video, covering issues. Then we'll have a panel, a high-level panel. One of my favorite people, Professor Tugan, Dr. Nathan Karimba, Dr. Gishige. This is not right. Okay, so Kamau. Dr. Kamau, to talk about some opportunities and also what kind of challenges and what we need to do. Now, to switch gears a bit, I'll start looking at startups. And in the startups side, I have one panel where I have Esther Jonas, Tesla, Jessica, if I can still get her online, Jessica Colacho. So let's see where we land. So I think over there, let's start with Dr. Sibanda's video, if the technical guys can run that. Please run it.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be talking to you today. And I'd like to apologize for not being able to join you in person, but the recent Omicron variant has imposed severe travel restrictions, and I'm currently stuck in Accra, but it's a pleasure to be able to address you today. I'd like to also congratulate Dr. Tony Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be talking to you today, and I'd like to apologize for not being able to join you in person. Stuck in Accra, but it's a pleasure to be able to address you today. I'd like to also congratulate Dr. Tony Omwasa and his team at Kenya Innovation Agency and everybody that has been working hard to bring on board the Kenya Innovation Week. For those of you that have not met me, my name is McLean Sibanda. I'm the Managing Director for Big and Global Limited, which is an infrastructure development company. And I've spent over 15 years in innovation. My last post being as CEO of the Innovation Hub in Pretoria, and have worked across the continent with entrepreneurs, innovators, and innovation enablers in different innovation ecosystems. So my intervention today is really perhaps to provide some perspectives on commercialization. And I'd like to kick off by saying that it's not about ideas, but it's about making ideas happen. And that is what commercialization is about. It's a difference between invention and innovation. Because ideas are for free, and in essence, the process of invention is when we come up with potential solutions to existing challenges. But commercialization is when we work hard to make.
Thank you very much. My name is Kamau Gashige. I run Gearbox. Gearbox is a hub to encourage those who have good ideas for products that need to be manufactured to be able to do so from a very hands-on, practical way. I have taught at the University of Nairobi in engineering for very many years. I was involved in the innovation center there, setting up a science and technology park in the past, and that's really what led to setting up of Gearbox. Gearbox is a non-profit. We have two for-profit companies. One is called Mashinani, or Machine Africa Network of Industries, and there's a second one called Gearbox Europlacer, and in fact that's, I believe, what Robert in the last session was referring to when he spoke about people manufacturing electronic circuitry in the country. We are one of quite a small number doing that here. Thank you.
Excellent. So I want us to just dive in. Why is commercialization of innovation and research important?
Okay, so as you heard, my background is in university. So universities are where the knowledge is to be taught and also generated. And if you can't do that adequately, the entire fourth industrial revolution is built upon that process being done both in universities and in companies that have the, I could almost say, luxury to be able to do R&D. But very often it's national governments that make it possible for the high-risk work of R&D to be done within the university setting, where young minds and older minds come together to be able to make that possible. But the fruit of that enterprise, that whole endeavor to come up with new ideas and innovations, and in a country like this, where those innovations are tailored to our own marketplace, the fruit, which is the ideas, are just the first step. If those ideas remain simply as ideas and are not able to diffuse into the marketplace, and that is where commercialization comes in, then in fact, it's basically a waste of time. And so it's extremely important to be able to have an efficient commercialization ecosystem, because that's when the impact will be felt by the citizens of any given country. And so in a nutshell, that's why commercialization is so critical.
Yeah, do you want to give it a shot as well?
My colleague here has put it very well. I don't think I can improve on it,
Okay.
except to say that in any given university, We have hundreds, if not thousands, of innovations every year, and all of them are gathering dust somewhere.
Okay, so that now brings me to the next question, which is why?
Well, I think the very nature of our university, our researchers, our postgraduate students, and so on, their motivation is to write papers, to get their postgraduate degrees, to get promotions, to get recognition by peers. They are not business people, and they do not think beyond what they are doing. So there has to be an intervention of sorts to bring it out there.
No, not too fast. So what kind of intervention are we talking about?
At JQuat, what they decided was to start a company which can try and deal with that issue. Try being the operative word. Huh?
Kamau?
Yeah, just to build on what my colleague here said, it's necessary for an ecosystem to be built up, and specifically within the context of the backdrop being the fourth industrial revolution. It was probably a lot easier a couple of decades ago for poorer countries to be able to build on the knowledge that they build locally or even import from outside to grow their economy. Now with the fourth industrial revolution, if specific interventions are not made at the policy level in particular, then the ecosystem necessary for this to happen will not naturally evolve. In fact, this covered, there's a wide range of factors that are necessary to be put into place. I did some work with the World Economic Forum. There's a council there called the Global Council on the Future of Manufacturing that I sat on for some years. And in that context, we did some work on how any given country can look at this problem or this challenge of the fourth industrial revolution and how not to get left behind. And there were two elements. One was to take a snapshot of the economy in its current state and to say, this is where we are. And the tools used for that, according to this study that we had done, was number one, to determine what is the economic complexity in that given country. And in a short phrase, this can be captured as the idea of how many different products that you need can you competitively make or manufacture within your country. So it's one thing to be able to make any of the things that you see around you, even the chair that you're sitting on, but to do so competitively is something else altogether. And then the second factor from the snapshot perspective is looking at the scale of the economy of that particular country. And so once you have that picture, there were 6 drivers from a policy perspective that we were recommending could be used by policymakers. And 2 of them were technology and innovation, and the second one was human capital or human resource development. And that's what I guess both of us represent, both of those, because the technology and innovation is being developed by people within a university setting. The other 4 are for governments, and they covered global trade and investment, institutional frameworks, sustainable resources, and the demand environment. And so if you're able to crack the first 2, technology and innovation, you have a lot of innovations, thousands of innovations sitting in, and I completely attest to that. There's so many innovations that are the result of final year projects, master's projects, PhD projects that just sit and do nothing because the ecosystem hasn't been developed. Secondly, you have human capital. Kenya is very gifted in this particular space. If you think about like the most advanced car manufacturing plant in the world at Tesla, I visited it. The person who took me around is Charles Mwangi, young Kenyan guy. He had 400 engineers working under him, directly reporting to Elon Musk. We have the talent. And so it's only that, where is it? What are we doing to bring it together? So, and the point I'm making is that if you master those 2, the technology and innovation and human capital, but the other 4 remain undeveloped, then this ends up being an exercise in exhibitions, showing what you can do, but the commercialization hasn't been achieved in that respect. So this is really important. And one other point I'd like to make is that the commercial environment, normally we consider it to be the marketplace, but the marketplace can be deeply influenced by government. So government is the biggest procurer in any country. So if government is able to make a policy, and we know it's the case in Kenya on paper, that the government will do the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya type policies and break it down even further to make sure that women and youth and disabled persons are particularly taken care of within that context. If that's not done in a real way, then you're missing a huge opportunity, because the government can, from its own resources, treasury, which is taxpayer money, actually do a lot to develop the commercial space. And that includes the military as well. And we know military in many different countries is a special category of consumer of taxpayer money. They don't have the many layers of oversight that others do. And that has been used to great effect in countries that have the vision to be able to grow their own economy. So Kenya, even as small as this space is, can still do a great deal to grow the space by focusing its own taxpayer money on procuring from its own. I think that's something that's missing.
So that sounds very interesting, and I think it sounds very doable. But when you look at so for instance, at JQAT, you guys manufactured some laptops, right? So why can't the other research go into the same kind of channels to be able to produce and manufacture other things? What are the challenges that you guys have?
You said manufacture what?
Laptops. Yeah. Okay. You did that, right? Or did I get it wrong?
Yes, there has been a laptop production unit, but I'm not directly involved in it, so that is another entity. So I would rather talk about what I do know about. Okay. Some of the things which we've dealt with are in food, like agricultural production, biotechnology. Tissue culture is not new, it's been there forever. But one of the first researchers who brought it into the Kenyan context was one of our staff. And she worked with bananas, and we are the ones who produce the bananas, right? We put the setup, we produce the bananas. But more than that, we commission other forms of biotechnology. Right? When it comes to food, we do have factories, by the way, but they are food factories. So we have one which deals with flour. We have one that is dairy. We have one that deals with livestock feeds. And we have one which is more like pasta. Yeah, pasta products. Yeah.
And these are factories that are producing these things at scale to sell to the public.
Well, we look at ourselves as proof of concept people. So we do have factories, like our flour factory is capable of producing 1 ton per hour. But we do not see ourselves as Unga or anything like that. We see where we'd like to be is to come up with products that would interest the likes of Unga. Yeah, but in the meantime, we do actually make the products and sell them. Okay. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, you have. And you see, I'm driving at something because you see, so if you go up to that level, so you need a commercial entity to come in so that they can scale. Is that correct, Dr.
Generally speaking, yes. And when universities get it right, a good example would be Israel. They make sure that whilst they own those factories entirely, 100% probably, or they could do a joint venture, but they should have the majority control. They then give out the running of it to entirely commercial unit. What I did with Gearbox, me and the people that put it together, was supposed to have been done at the University of Nairobi. But because of very burdensome bureaucracy, so that if I wanted to order a bunch of pens, it had to go through central procurement, and there has to be, they sit down and meet and so on and so forth. That kills it. But if you have an entity owned by the university that operates with the agility of a regular company that's out there in the marketplace, that accounts for what is done after the fact, rather than having to do what I just described, then you start to find that it'll grow like any other company would, and be able then to give back and reduce the university's dependence on treasury for its own existence. But if what most institutions do is they place those under their own staff, which you have to be very lucky to get the right person who can, and it's possible. But typically you might want to look outside in the marketplace to get somebody who has been doing it in the marketplace to come and run it, but be answerable to a board of the university.
So I'll take some questions if there are any. Just raise your hands. So I'll ask one question, then I'll come to you. Okay. So there's something really, and you guys, I think, are in the right age. Because I think innovation research has not started now in Kenya. I remember I was so proud to see Kenya produce a car called Nyayo Pioneer. What went wrong there?
Okay, so I happen to have been on the board of the company that did that. Not at the time that they did it, but a decade and a half later. But I do have some understanding of the history. And it was mostly political interference. So it was a political initiative, which was great. So the president of Kenya at the time challenged the engineers and said, "You're engineers. You know how cars work. Why don't you make a car?" And the academic community said, "Okay, buy us the equipment." And that's what he did. And so before you knew it, Mitsubishi was knocking on the door saying, "Can we partner to be able to make Mitsubishis in Kenya with this partnership?" And that's how a lot of countries build their own auto brands through joint ventures, because you're partnering with countries that have done it for a long time. And to go head to head with them is almost impossible without really major protectionist type policies that may or may not work. And so what happened then is that, let's just say, to avoid any libelous statements, there was...
No, you're allowed to, man. You're allowed to.
It's been some couple of decades, right? So there was interference of the political nature and corrupt type of, overtones that meant that it died. And since then, there's been many other attempts. There was an attempt to make lathe machines. 100 lathe machines were made at NMC, the same numerical machining complex. They work, they're mechanical, and they were to be sold to universities. But again, because the ecosystem is not as fluid as it should be, they actually sit there. If you go and take a tour, you'll find the one vehicle made there. There were a couple actually, but one of them is sitting there, and 100 lathe machines sitting there. They work very well. And so there's kind of like an abortion of purpose, because the other parts of the ecosystem that I've been mentioning were not put into place to make it work as it should have.
Okay. Do you want to add anything to that?
The only thing I'd like to add is something my esteemed colleague said earlier. At JKUAT Enterprises is a completely private company. It does not get funding from government or even from the university. And we do not have the layers of bureaucracy that...
Okay, yeah. Good. Okay, Piki Ponki.
Good afternoon. I'll be very quick. I so happen to be leading an American university in Africa. And so the question, I'm just stuck on why you self-censor. You do all the research, you do all the innovation, you have the companies, and then you don't go to market yourself. Because we have, so I'll mention just two enterprises at Arizona State University, and that's why we continue to rank the #1 school in innovation. We have a learning enterprise that does all the credentialing, all the certificates, all the degrees, your traditional stuff. Then we have the knowledge enterprise. That's where we do a lot of our research, innovation, channel companies. I've just shown my colleagues, we've just received a grant from NASA, $130 million, which includes building a commercial space center in Kenya. We did not say because there are people in the space, there are people in the space industry, we will reach here. So I'm struggling. So what is stopping you from, because you have the organization the same way we have it, but why are you not doing it yourself?
Okay, give the mic to Sheena. Then let's take all the three. There was another one, yeah. So we'll take all the three questions and we answer.
So my question is actually a follow-up from Philip's, which is, I understand what you're saying about academia being research, etc. But why can't you partner with business people as well? As in, why? I think Philip's question was put probably more aptly: is why are you stopping? But you don't. If you've got the innovators, you've got the academia, you've got the research, and you're right. I've been looking at the amount of research that's been done in universities, and I mean Gearbox and some of the things that you've done have just been so impressive. But I think the question is, why does it just have to be the same innovators who have to become business people? Why can't we, what's stopping you from having kind of business partnerships? I don't really see successful business. So when you go to, for example, Stanford, you have these big business leaders coming in and sharing and encouraging and motivating and creating these partnerships. Do we need kind of maybe, maybe innovators don't have to be the business people, right? But how do we bring in more of these kind of efficient partnerships to then reach to Philip's point, which is scale and think bigger?
Good question. The last question there, then we can go to my panel. Do you have any questions from the online audience?
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen from Nakosti. The question I wanted to ask, especially the madam from Jomo Kenyatta University. I know Dr. was in charge of the IHAP. Was it called IHAP? Lab for Fabrication at
Fab
UN?
Lab.
Lab Fab at University of Nairobi. I visited when you were doing it before you moved out. But the question is, I've visited also JQuat and I've looked at what they've been doing. How come these innovations or the products you make have not been able to break even in the market? Has it to do with maybe the cost of production? Is it something to do maybe with how they look like? And is it possible for us? Because one of the things that has actually made us not be able to do most of these things is we don't have actually somebody who produces molds that can produce on a larger scale some of these items. Is that the problem? And I would have I really liked somebody from Kirida, I know a board member is here, she will not actually stand up and answer it, to tell
Where
us.
is she? Where is she?
You will get
Where
to
is she?
know. What is the role of Kiridi in this case? Can it be able to provide leadership, especially in providing molds? Because I know these bottles, when you see most of them here are produced in Kariobangi. Why? Because we are able to make those small molds there. But why are we not making molds to make spare parts of, let's say, the laptops?
Sawa, got the question. Back to you guys. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try and answer the questions from this part of the auditorium. We do the sort of thing that we do is roughly in its infancy. JKU Art Enterprises has been operating for 15 years. And in those few years, it has had to do, well, the beauty of it is we can think out of the box. In fact, I went there about 13 years ago, and the reason I agreed to go there was because we could actually do exactly what we wanted, which is very rare, as my colleague would say. We are not really hampered by what we can do. We do partner with business people, but we've not been able to do it on a large scale. So, for example, we do have the private sector, like we had a flower farm that needed the protocols for roses, for tissue culturing roses. They commissioned us to do it, and we did it. Yes, commercially. That is one way. We are not averse to partnering, but I don't think we are in the same space as yet, right? And as for whether we do put our things out there, we do put our things out there, but we are not set up and we do not have ambition to be really big manufacturers. Our strength is innovation. Our strength is that R&D is very easy for us, right? So when it comes to food, for example, a PhD student might come up with a food that when it is fed to children, really improves their parameters, their growth parameters. In fact, we have such a product made out of flour of one of the vegetables or something in the country. And it was tested in the most ordinary hospitals where the poor people are. And when compared to the control group, these children were performing 80% better, whether it is weight, whether it is alertness, whether it is bone density or what have you, when they are fed with this particular flour. Now, it behoves us to actually start the process of putting it out there. But we are not going to be able to feed the whole of Kenya or the whole of Africa as a university. So yes, we do put things out there, but we've not tried to put them in a big scale.
Okay, very quickly, that's 30 seconds. I am a businessman. I have a flour mill. I want to partner with you. What do I need to do?
Just approach us. We are always ready to talk.
Okay, business people, you've had that. Approach them. Okay.
Yeah, so I would agree with what has just been said. I think specifically there needs to be a culture and a history that can be built upon. I dare say that Philip, in the position that he is with the Thunderbird School, you have a certain exposure and so on and so forth. So for you to be able then to have a conversation out there with NASA or somebody isn't that difficult because there's an entire build-up. Now, very often the universities have been quite isolated and the researchers there as well, but it's not a uniform thing. So that in spaces like the food research, there's been a lot of great stuff. As far back as the 70s, people get excited about ICT and IT generally in Kenya, which has earned us the moniker of Silicon Savannah. But in the 70s, a lot of the seeds that we grow today were developed at University of Nairobi. Kenya Seed Company would sell them, never gave a shilling back to the university. There was no ecosystem to be able to make that happen. And we've been trying to chase the money. When I was at University of Nairobi before, and it's quite difficult because the money is not there right now. But anyway, so the point then is that we need to build a culture. So events like this are important. You've just heard of certain innovations and an announcement has been made. This is what will grow that ecosystem and an appreciation from the private sector of what is actually available. Look at ISIPE. ISIPE now, in the same sense that we go out to study in Europe and so on, a lot of people from those countries come here to do their research on entomology after Professor Odiambo set that up in the 80s and earlier. So it's something that has to be built upon. The kind of research money that's attracted into Kenya for medical research, particularly around HIV and molecular biology, which is a central part of the fourth industrial revolution, which is usually forgotten in these conversations, is tremendous. There's a lot of money coming into Kenyatta National Hospital from various sources for that kind of research. So I think it's a matter of, I would say, greater focus. The policy environment in particular should be able to be set up because a lot of the research, like if you take the question of molds, and this is an area that we work on ourselves, the sophistication of molds requires a lot of hands-on practice so that you can have a very high-performing engineer who hasn't actually themselves made a tool for injection molding or blow molding, which there are certain aspects, it's beyond the shape, it's the runners, there's various technical things that have to be in place. And so if we had the structured partnerships with industry that make that possible, and it could be industry outside the country, that would help to build the internal competence in that. So it's beyond what you're taught from an academic point of view until such a time that a practitioner who is Kenyan or not, or from anywhere in the world comes to teach within the university, and we're not currently set up for that. That kind of a person would come almost do it pro bono because they've finished their career and they're coming back to give, so they're not coming to the university for a salary. They're coming because they want to give back. That isn't the case right now. So you'll find a lot of people going into lecturing when they went, the route is first class, at your bachelor's, and you're convinced by your lecturers to come and become a tutorial fellow, and you sort of build that way, but you haven't necessarily had the opportunity to be out there as an engineer in the practical field. And so what you're giving to your students is barely beyond what's in the textbook, even though you have the capacity to be able to grasp it. So these are all ecosystem matters that need to be sorted out so that we can tease out the best ecosystem to take us to where we want to go. And again, I go back to this question of what the government can do, being the biggest procurer. So with this question of economic complexity as an analysis, a very interesting map has been drawn of about 120 countries by this group in Harvard. And if you look at the Kenyan drawing, it's basically a lot of dots. And where the dots are dark in the middle is where most of the connections between industries occur. So if I take, for example, fish industry, this is the example they give in the paper actually. If you've developed a cold chain structure for fish, to take it from the lake to the port and so on, then to be able to sidestep, take one step to the right or left, and to be able to do the same thing for cut flowers or some other product that requires a cold chain is quite easy. So those are the complexity aspects. And if you look at all the exports in Kenya, the major exports, cut flowers, if you look at the oil refinery products, you look at coffee, you look at tea, they're all outside of the zone. And so from a policy perspective, any of the companies working, like the tea factories in Kericho, imagine that a gear breaks down. If that tea factory was in India, it would probably be less than 5 kilometers to the solution. Some place where they'll fix it, and in a couple of days you have it fixed and you'll put it back on the line. In Kenya, we'll probably send it to that same factory in India and get it back in 6 months. So yes, we're making tea. It is the biggest foreign exchange earner, but it's efficient. Much less efficient than it should be. It's inefficient, I'm sorry. Much less efficient than it should be. So if the government were able then to make certain policy decisions that now come and say, you guys at the university, here is some of that hard-earned revenue from tea, 1% for you to do the research to make sure that you're able to do what's necessary to serve that industry, then you start to see changes happen. And then what was mentioned by Sheena, joint ventures with companies from outside. We were approached by Bosch. And Bosch said this was a numerical machining complex when I was on the board. And they gave us a drawing for a shaft from a grinder, one of the many hand tools that they make. And they said, if you can make this efficiently, we want 750,000 a year. And that's just the first product. And I visited them in Germany. They told us they want to manufacture tools, drills, all this in Africa for the African market, which is growing like no other market in the world presently. And so we need to be able to capitalize on that. Then last point quickly, I got an email from the Nigerian National Sovereign Fund. Yeah, and I was shocked that they had one. And it's $1 billion, so it's not a game. It's small compared to many others in the developed world, but it's a big step forward. So until we get to that point, so the government says, let's put up money and say this money is here to develop key industries that are selected on the basis of something like the economic complexity analysis, to say it better be around tea, it better be around the big export earners. Then you bring in the brains at the university, and have a database where Kenyans who are working out there can now find a way to come back home that will be, worth their while. Then you can start seeing change.
Awesome, awesome. I think it's, yeah, please clap. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing listening to you and looking at all these opportunities that are there, but we have these kinky policies and dysfunctional regulations that are hindering us from moving forward. So we need to close. Tell me, just give me one thing that we probably need to do for us to move forward. Just one.
I think that the universities, now I'll only talk about universities, probably we need a mindset change. I don't think they take it seriously enough, but it could be even a big money earner for them in the future if they took it more seriously.
My comment would be a build up on that, and really that in any country the most important resource is human. And if we could do whatever we do, we've got the big four and so on, and then focus on developing the people within the country to be able to do more. Skills, it's the more highly educated, but it's also the low education. There's big steps being done for example, with the recognition of prior learning, which is being put into place by NITA, the National Industrial Training Authority, and I happen to chair the board. That is something that is phenomenal, because it says anybody who's out there, let's say, for example, you were taught by your uncle how to weld, you come into a center, we assess your welding capacity, we give you a grade, you can get up to the equivalent of a postgraduate certificate without ever having stepped into a school of education using the RPL setup. And that means that you're activating your population in new ways. And wherever you have shortcomings, you're told, if you do a course like this or like that, then you can get your level up. And so if we focus on the top, but on the bottom as well, then the human resource is what will build the solution.
Excellent. My grandpa taught me how to do plumbing, so I'll go to Nito. Thank you very much. Please clap for my panelists. Thank you. I appreciate you guys. I'm not going to try to summarize this. Yeah, thank you. We are rolling straight into the next panel because we have one of the panelists who is online. This is a startup movement. Yeah, the startup movement in Kenya, status, successes, and challenges. Do we have our panelists? I can't see them here. And I didn't grow ears behind here, so. Okay, Jonas, hi. Yeah, the startup movement in Kenya, status, successes. I think I also have Esther. Esther's here? Yep. Do we have our panelists? I can't see them here. Jess, I know you have to drop off, but please bear with us.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, Jonas, hi. Okay.
Hey, Dr. Tony,
Hi.
how you
Should we
doing?
just stand
All's
and talk?
well?
Esther?
Yeah.
Esther's here? Okay. Yep. So we're in an innovation summit. So we are not, because we need to see those guys. Oh, they're there. Okay. So we can. Okay. We were going to just stand and talk. Okay. Hi. Okay, so quickly, maybe we just get everybody to introduce themselves. We'll start with the guys online. Let's start with you, Jess. Just tell us who you are, what you've done, and why we are talking to you about the startup ecosystem. I think Jess dropped off. Did she? Hey, Jess. Hi. Yeah, just introduce yourself. Who you are, what you do, and why we are talking to you about.
I think Jess dropped off.
The startup.
Is she? Hey, Jess.
Hi.
Yeah, just introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Who you are, what you do, and why we are talking to you about. I think Jess dropped off.
The startup.
Is she?
Can I talk to you?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you. Also. Hi.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Colasso. I have been in the startup scene for over 15 years. I started out as a computer scientist, trained over 500 developers way back in 2006 and 7. While working as a management consultant at Strathmore, and then started the first tech hub in Kenya in 2010 with Eric Hirschman, and left after 6 years and became an entrepreneur in HR tech right now, and also very keen on the logistics industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Jonas, please introduce yourself. I think we have a serious static. Latency. So let me talk to this. Who are you? Who are you?
Hi, Dr. Tony. Are you asking me? I think I lost you for a few seconds.
Yes, Jonas. Tell us who you are.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry for that. I'm actually in Mogadishu, and I think I'm having a little bit internet issue, but let me go ahead. My name is Jonas Tesfu. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Pange Accelerator. We worked with over 200 startups, mainly based out of Kenya. And we also work with scale-ups in Africa. I also have the privilege of being in the technical committee of the Kenya National Innovation Agency. I've been looking forward to this panel and to the Kenya Innovation Week for a long time. So very happy to be with you, Dr. Tony.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, Esther, back to you now. Who are you?
Clearly the one who missed the memo. I should have been online. Nobody told me this. But yeah, my name is Esther Ndeti. I'm investment lead at Unconventional Capital. We go by ANCAP for short. And what we are is an early stage investment funding platform, where we're trying to democratize early stage funding, invest in as many early stage businesses across Africa as possible, doing that really, really early ticket size, at 10 to 50K, which is not easy to find, to get you through the initial hurdle, the initial value of death, across every sector. Focused on 4 countries for now, but looking to scale this up. So we're looking to do investments at scale in the future. So currently we have 27 businesses that we've invested in. We're currently going through a due diligence process where we'll invest in another 100 in the next few months. And then we'll open up our rounds of applications again and do this again and more businesses going forward. But I was listening to Jessica introduce herself in 2007. Dr. Gashigi was my university lecturer at University of Nairobi. So it's always interesting coming back to see him in platforms like this. I don't know if you remember me. I was the only one who knew how to do a PowerPoint presentation. But that's just a joke, by the way. But then, so I have a background in mechanical engineering. Did not want to do the traditional route, working in a corporate sector. Tried to have a startup immediately out of the university. I like to call myself a recovering entrepreneur. And then I moved into the ESO space, where I worked for Andy, which is a network of impact investors and various entities in the impact space. And then for the last 5 years, I was executive director at the East Africa Venture Capital Association. But then I'm very passionate about startups and early stage businesses. And so now I'm at ANCAP, where I get to work with them directly.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to go back to Jessica. So Jessica, 15 years ago, when you guys were starting iHub, to today, if you were to do an evaluation of 0 to 10, where 0 is like the very least and 10 is the best, where would you say, what would you say we've done as a country in terms of growing our startups?
Wow, you're measuring that on a quantifiable level. Are you gauging it on a scale of 1 to 10 today or 15 years ago?
No, today.
Harry, we've got a long way to evolve the startup ecosystem. So I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, we are at 5. And I'm being quite conservative because 15 years ago, there was no startup ecosystem in Kenya. The startup ecosystem came about in 2011 during the Pivot East competition, whereby a Time Journalist magazine actually coined the term the Silicon Savannah. And that's where we actually saw startups actually pitching, like what we see Techstars at that point in time and Y Combinator in this day and age. And then the rise of accelerators coming up and Pangaea coming up, where people could actually join a cohort and get mentored, get access to markets, capital, team. So 10 years later, we're still halfway through. I would even say less than halfway, because we are like on our first, probably going to a second wave of the growth of startups in this country. So we have a long way to go in terms of enabling the startup ecosystem.
And maybe you can start this, but then Jonas can take it up. What would you say are the major challenges?
Well, the major challenges I see with startups right now, it was not like 10 years ago, which is access to angel capital and VC capital. Clearly, we've seen a growth in the last 2 to 3 years on various forums like Brighter Intelligence and the other reports that are actually generated out there. Nigeria and Kenya have been doing really well in terms of injecting VC capital and angel capital into the startup ecosystem. I think a major challenge facing startups right now is access to good talent. Access to talent whereby at different levels of growth, from MVP to the next level of product market fit to the next level of growth. I think startups do have a lot of challenges when it comes to finding good talent in this market and globally as well. What's the right fit for the actual market? And the next thing, apart from talent, is access to valuable partnerships that can actually scale them from one country to another. I let my colleague Jonas actually build on this.
Yes, please, Jonas, you can proceed.
Yeah, thank you so much. I fully agree on the talent. Access to talent has become a huge problem, and we see that when working with many of the scale-ups, that's one area that they all kind of struggle, and they all need support, try to understand where should they recruit from, how should they recruit, and what kind of HR organization building strategy makes a lot of sense. When it comes to value adding partnerships, I also fully agree there. What you start seeing now is that you can find two growth companies that are what do you say? In a way, not completing themselves, but like they're a very good synergy. They're a very good match, and you can see that one business is operating maybe in East Africa, the other one in West Africa, or maybe one is on a growth path. Then the other one tags along. So as one growth company is scaling, so does the other one. Another level of partnerships is affiliate partnerships, where you start seeing a lot more interesting things. And the last level of partnership is probably power couples, where you can see that a fintech startup wants to create a neobank and leverages the infrastructure of an already existing commercial bank, for example, in Kenya. So then, when a big player innovates together with a small player, that is also extremely interesting. Yeah.
Interesting. Probably 5 years ago, if I asked this question, the first answer will be capital. Yeah, that would be the first answer. That the problem is capital, the challenge is capital. So now we're talking about skills, we're talking about partnerships. I think it's interesting to hear this. And back to you, Esther. So there's this new report that has come out, and it says about African startups received about $4 billion worth of investment in the last 12 months. I think Nigeria did 1.3 billion. South Africa, 833 billion. Egypt got some 500 billion, and Kenya got about 300 million dollars, not billion, million.
Yeah.
So
next year, Harry, we have the billions.
So about 2012, Nigeria was actually chasing Kenya in terms of innovation, in terms of capital raising, in terms of number of startups. But now it looks like Nigeria has gone. Whew. What's going on?
So I agree with my two fellow panelists in terms of talent and partnerships being some of the challenges. But one of the things we also forget is, even when we're talking about access to capital, we need to also really think about the types of capital available. which is why, I was really emphasizing the early stage capital scene. So one of the things Nigeria has that's definitely stronger than Kenya, for instance, is the early stage financing scene. Their depth and sort of like intensity of angel investing, for instance, and all of that like pre-seed capital is much stronger than here. Why is this important? The growth of businesses and sort of like the number of businesses that make it through the first tranche and are able to get to the scale-up point. When you don't develop the early stage side, you don't have enough businesses to invest in and grow into the next, scale up, whatever size that you're looking for. So we still need to work on that pipeline, exactly, deal flow, whatever you want to call it, feed the river, whatever you want to call it, right? So we're still lagging in that part. I think we're still, and this is in all fronts. In Nigeria, for instance, there's local venture capital firms that are seeded by local capital. We're still working on that on this end of the continent, for instance. So we still need to talk about how do we unlock and mobilize capital that actually feeds the vast number of businesses that need this. At that early stage, so that we can have more, making it to become, more, bigger sized, attract bigger investments from whatever, right? Second point is, if you look at the number of businesses that attracted capital in Nigeria that actually pushed them to the 1 point whatever billion, you'll find that it's not numbers, it's more like, there's very few businesses in specific sectors, particularly fintech, that were able to attract that, capital and then, overshot the size of, capital that's been invested in there. I think in Kenya, one of the things we have is it's several businesses in various sectors who are able to attract capital. Not at the same size as Nigeria yet, but we are more diverse in terms of sector, in terms of sizes. Not enough unicorns, obviously. Actually, no unicorns in Kenya, actually. But I think we're getting there. We also need to realize and Jessica alluded to this, our startup scene is much younger than South Africa and Nigeria. So yes, they were lagging behind in terms of innovation, but in terms of depth, in terms of things that were being pushed, they were moving away from the commodities market and trying to diversify and figure out things. And then they don't have issues around, they have issues, but they don't have it as much as us with regards to talent, for instance. They have this entire diaspora community that's coming back to Nigeria to build businesses and all of that. So they're leg forward in terms of exposure, in terms of capital. They're coming back either to build businesses or to invest in the local businesses there. We don't have the numbers to be able to be comparable to Nigeria, for instance.
Okay. Questions from the audience? I'll mic to Ben.
Yeah, I just have an add-on to this, Harry, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Just because I think it's interesting what Esther mentioned on diaspora. And last year, Kenya had $3.1 billion in remittances being sent, which is great. And it was an increase with 11%. But if you compare that with Nigeria had, they went from $25 billion to $34 billion in remittances. So their increase was $9 billion in 1 year, which is 3 times more than what Kenya sent. So you see that
a lot of noise was made, and Silicon Savannah's made a lot of noise. But a mutual friend of ours calls it Silicon Savannah, because a noise was made, but the exits were not there, and the successes did not come from the noise. So we've maybe overhyped the noise. Whereas Nigeria, you're getting Paystex getting acquired, you're getting bigger companies getting acquired. Some companies in Kenya have been acquired, like DPO that was founded in Kenya, but somehow the noise isn't there, So the noise about the successes seems to be less than just the noise about we're doing great things,
So are you saying we're not telling our stories?
We're telling stories, but they're stories, and we're not telling the success stories widely enough. There are success stories, but they're not being told widely enough. That's the big success.
I think that's an interesting insight, Harry. Maybe I can talk about that.
Go ahead, Jess.
I'm a big fan of good storytelling, and unfortunately, in this part of the world, we let external media tell our story. We as local journalists need to tell our stories of success. And stories of success have become about startups raising large funding rounds. I think that is one measure of the success journey. The success journey is a company in this part of the world profitable? Are they getting the right talent? Are they getting the right partnerships? Are they getting the right investors to invest in them? Are they opening up past the Kenyan border to other markets across the continent? I think we need to dig deeper into these stories of success. Just past the funding. Funding is one measure of success, but raising a huge round of funding, according to me, is not success. It enables your growth and fuels your growth and probably gets you to where you need to be in terms of success. So I think we really need to reconfigure how we tell our stories and how we tell it locally with our approach.
That's a good point. That's a good point, and I think Florence is very dear to that reconfiguring of what we look at success or all these milestones or KPIs that we give ourselves. Josephine?
Thank you very much. Josephine is my name, from Konza Technopolis. You talked about the issue of lack of local seed capital. And actually, it's one of the things we are looking at. And maybe I can ask you from your experience with the other markets. This is Esther. Yes,
Yeah,
Esther. So what do you think we need to do differently so that we can mobilize this local capital? And by capital, I mean, of course, there's the funds, but there's also the professionals in the diaspora all over the world to really just come in and support our startup ecosystem so that then we can get the benefits that come from that local investment.
Oh, wow. That was a focus of my previous role.
This country was built on...
Yeah. So, no, if I wish I had the answers for this. I just know it's a long, tedious process. I think one of the things we need to see is just track record, which goes back to Ben's question, really, right? You talk about Silicon Savannah, so where are those big exits, right? Why are we not seeing them? But I think we shouldn't be pointing our fingers at the startups. I think we should be pointing at the fingers, for instance, to the early funds. Let's take a look back into history. I know Jess talked about 2010 being sort of like the start of the startup scene, but let's look from 2006 going into like 2015, that 10-year gap, right? Who was being invested in? And why my phone is here is because I wanted to be very clear about this. The only thing that was not off-grid, the M-Coopers, and the only thing that was not off-grid in that 10-year period was who you just mentioned, DPO, and then we had Copia a few years later. Everything else there was D-Light, Greenlight, PowerGen, Angaza, Sanergy. Oh, Angaza is not actually what that. PowerGen again, Sanergy. So we had this entire focus as Silicon Savannah, but we were focused on this off-grid. And I think it was really, and if you look at the founders and also the sort of like the nature of the funds that were investing in that, I feel like they had an agenda and they drove that agenda. And those are the vintage funds that were active in Kenya. And as a vintage fund in 10 years, and you're not able to show proper exits then, so the next round of funding became really difficult for the funds that were operating in Kenya. And even how they were selecting their businesses became very, very, very restricted. And so I think we need to look back sort of like who were the LPs, who were the funders at the time, which were the investments or the VCs that were active, what deals did they do, and how did that affect the entire trajectory of that VC space going forward, in terms of VC funds raising, in terms of performance, in terms of, whatever it is, the focus and the sectors that were, of importance. That's changing now. We're seeing, more diversity right now. But I think for a long time, we were stuck to what was being, determined for the ecosystem. And then, that drove our story. To your point, I spent 5 years working with local institutional capital, local institutional investors trying to educate. There's a whole education piece that needs to happen in terms of, so we partnered with the World Bank and FSD to create basically a toolkit that shows them how do you assess funds, how do you assess opportunities, how do you do due diligence, how do you allocate, how do you all of that, right? We also did a comparison guide looking at the performance of various assets versus the performance of private equity, not venture capital, because it's still too risky for institutional investors to look at venture capital. But then people like Sheena here are working with AAA, trying to get more African angel investors into the scene, particularly in Kenya. I know there's Nigeria and other countries in focus. I'm more focused in Kenya. Before that, Sheena, I remember in your time in Intellicap as well, you were working with various high net worth individuals as well, trying to do the same thing. There's a lot of education that needs to happen. We need to move away from buildings and real estate and all of that as the focus. I know the returns there make sense, obviously, but then we need a new generation that can see that there's more to it than just immediate returns and the quick, high returns from real estate and property and various other old government paper and other things, right? So there's a lot of work there, but I think there are people in this room who can speak to this much better than I, and one of them is Sheena there.
Thank you, Esther. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but before we go, I want to help my brother, Tony. So Tony has been given a KPI to breed unicorns. In the morning, you were given a KPI to breed unicorns. So can you please give Tony one idea of how he can breed those unicorns? Just one. What does he need to do as Kenya CEO? Anyone, you can start actually, Esther. Okay, Jessica?
Yeah, since I need to drop off, I have a hard stop. I think, look, in the past, I do know Dr. Sonia Mwanza and Dr. Gashigi have visited Israel to actually see whether we can actually replicate what they're doing in Kenya. I think it's a very hard model to replicate because they have a lot of government support. Now, I feel an institution like Kenya, what Tony and team are doing is to actually partner with private sector and see what kind of programs they can actually roll out together to give more support to the upcoming entrepreneurs. For example, as Dr. Kashigi mentioned earlier, is that fourth-year students who have amazing projects, can those projects be supported from that level? Other examples include cohorts coming out of accelerators like Pangea and other innovation accelerators. Can they receive support from these partnerships? So I think we need as much as we go out there and try and look at what can be implemented locally. I think we need a local hybrid solution of our own and not a copy-paste solution. That's my 2 cents. And I'd like to thank Harry very much for inviting me to this forum, and enjoy the rest of the week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you.
Just to jump into that question, Harry, I think what Rwanda is doing is extremely interesting, where they are trying to compete with Mauritius as part of being the financial hub on the continent. And I'm on a conference. I'm sorry, man. I got stopped by the migration police. Sorry. Let me come back to you. Yeah, he wanted me to take off the camera. He didn't understand it was a conference.
Do you want to take that question?
Okay, I think I'll probably take a different view. I'm not obsessed with unicorns. I lean on the other side, where can we create several? You can call them zebras. You can call them camels, whatever. They have all these different names in between. I think my colleague used to call them those fast-moving things, whatever they're called.
Actually, in Uganda, it's Ankole cows.
That one. And, businesses that are solving societal issues, creating jobs, having the impact that's relevant to the communities that they're in, and growing organically. I'm really not, I'm the wrong person to be sitting on a unicorn panel completely. I just think unicorns are something that have been devised in parts of the world where they're able to do that. You have so many, businesses that have grown to a certain level that they can afford to have unicorns and all these other things. If we have one, fine, well and good, I think that's fantastic. But I think to be able to really move our economy to the next level, create the jobs that we need, create the kind of livelihoods that are needed on this continent, really, I think we need several businesses in every sector that are growing organically and, and are, at a state where they're creating the impact that they need to create without sort of like being this competition in terms of which part of the continent has unicorns or whatever it is. So I take a different view.
That's a good view. Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause to my panelists. Now we got Jonas arrested, so let's try and see how we can bring him back home. Maybe we need to start a hashtag. Yeah. So thank you guys. We really appreciate you. You are the last people standing. This is a graveyard shift. So thank you. There's one more panel. There's a celebration, so don't go away. Stay put as we leave the stage. Thank you very much. So I'm a different person. And we are celebrating innovativeness of Kenyans. This is a theme of this session. This is a theme of this event, celebrations. So I want to invite the representative from MasterCard to come and lead this particular segment of the program. Do we have somebody from MasterCard? Else
Good evening. We have a team that's online virtually.
Oh, there you are. Hi.
Please, hi, good evening. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Please introduce yourself, then you can take the session forward.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Edna Carijo. I work at Immobilis and we are a team. So it's my pleasure to be here on behalf of my colleagues who are also streaming in virtually the larger Nigeria program, the MasterCard Foundation, Kenya Private Sector Alliance, Immobilis, and of course the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs. So my name is Edna Carijo. We'll get straight into this session. It's my pleasure to be here this evening together with my colleagues, as I've mentioned, for this extremely important conversation as we celebrate the milestones on innovation and the great strides that our country has made. We celebrate the innovation of Kenyans and the achievements that we have made as a country under the national priorities